Welcome to the Red Letters Podcast. In this podcast, we explore topics that can be life transforming while delivering a message of hope.
Hello, everyone. I just want to welcome you to this Red Letters Podcast. And my name is Aida, and I am here actually today with Tony, Ruth, and Gio. And today Gio's going to be sharing his testimony. And so to begin with, Gio, I just want to thank you for taking the time to share with us your testimony. And my first question for you would be, when was it that you first encountered God in your life?
For me, I think it started a lot later than it should. I wish it would have been, because I was raised up with you guys in the church, and we went to church since before I was born. I knew you guys were involved in the church, and I think it was 2015 when my older brother, your oldest son, was used by God to, I don't know how to say it.
There was a moment that our family actually experienced God in our home.
Yeah. So he was used by God to basically tell us to clean the house. And seeing my older brother, who I was used to seeing him in a different way, was completely different. And you could tell it wasn't him. So I knew, okay, this isn't my older brother. This is a genuine encounter with God. And it wasn't like a personal encounter, other than the fact it was through everyone in the family experienced what I experienced. But when I personally experienced it, my eyes were open. Okay, this is real. Before that, I know as a kid, I don't remember a lot of the stuff, seeing stuff back then. But, I know Mom has stories about me seeing Jesus. But to me personally, I don't remember that. Like, there's no image in my head, which I wish I remembered it. But I know it was like 2 or something like that.
No, you were actually 5. Around 5.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I was 5?
Age, yeah.
Okay. Well, I thought I was.
I can't believe you can't remember. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But for me, I wish I could remember that. But I know that had a mark on me, and probably the way I don't know if it was the way I acted as a kid, but I just felt like there was something that day when Anthony spoke. That's when I first, okay, this is real to me.
And when would you say that you felt like either like a compelling or like, hey, I know of this God, but now I want to experience him for myself?
Well, I think that day, I remember sitting on the couch downstairs while everyone was, I think, going to sleep, and so my first thought was I was envious. And envious or jealous, I don't know which one of it.
Jealous maybe in a healthy way.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I saw that God used Anthony, I was like, I want to be used. I want to know God. But I know Anthony wasn't at the moment that I know of. He wasn't, like this. He wasn't tight with God. He wasn't, yeah. And it was just this random thing I couldn't explain. So that night, I remember feeling envious, like I want to be used by God. And that's when I started. I remember I bought this journal. I brought this journal, and I remember writing in it everything that was said that I could remember. And that's when I started actively trying to pray and get to know God for my own. Because you can't, I wasn't, expecting your guys' relationship to, save me in a way. I just wanted to know. I just wanted to know God on a personal level. And that's when I started reading, praying, and then staying up late and waking up early in the morning, trying to, I felt like I was obsessed with the idea of wanting to know him from that day on.
And I remember you wanting to get alone and experience God at a different level, where you wanted to go to the mountain or go out in like the wilderness, if you will, to go have God's voice be like a burning bush experience for you. Was that before or after that?
That was I think a year or 2 later, when I was getting to know God for myself. I was starting to feel his presence with me. I would hear him talking. I would feel like my heart would look up to heaven in a way, and I would feel like I could just feel him looking at me. That's when, like a year or two later, after I started really getting to know God personally, I felt like I wanted more. I just felt like I couldn't have enough of him. And so, yeah, I went, and Ruth dropped me off in the middle of Otay Lake somewhere random. I just told her, I was like, I think this should be good here. And so she dropped me off, and I had a tent. I think I just had a tent, a gallon of water, and then a box of Nature Valley granola bars.
That would have been a good commercial.
Yeah. And so that's all I took. And I was like, okay, I'm not planning on, eating a whole bunch. I'm just going to go randomly stay the weekend in this random mountain, literally no campground or anything. And so I went up there reading about John the Baptist. And I think John the Baptist was someone I looked up to because Jesus had said there was no man like John. And for him to be just human, but who had a relationship with God, that's what I wanted to strive to be like. And I took it literal when I went up to the mountain. I was like, I want to be like John. And I didn't stay 40 days or, wasn't raised up. I remember, there was one point, there was a locust, and I was like this close. I was like, do I really want to try this? But there was a genuine locust that had, I saw it, and I was like, nah, I'm not going to be like that. I had my granola bars. But on that mountain, I think that's when I was wanting that Moses burning bush encounter. And I wouldn't say it was like this, literal, fiery, experience, but there's little moments where I felt like God's hand was there. I remember one time Ruth reminded me of when I got there, I think the day after I got there, the next morning, I was sitting outside the tent, and it was like hot. It was like not the perfect time to be outside camping. And I went, and God told me, hey, get away from the tent, just stand off over there. And so I just did that. I walked along this little mountainside. I walked over, and then there was a swarm of bees that came over and like rushed through the tent, and then they flew off. And I was like, I wasn't thinking anything of it. And then I looked over, and you could see it's like a beautiful view over Otay Lakes, the lake and everything. And I was like pretty high up. And he told me to take off my glasses, and I took off my glasses, and I remember it was quiet, just me and God, and he told me to take off my glasses, and for like the first time, from what I remember, I could see clearly, like perfect vision. It felt like I could see like trees far away, and I started crying, like getting teary-eyed. And then after I stopped crying, I put my glasses back on. I don't know what that meant at the moment, but that was one of those encounters I still remember. And I remember God, giving me instructions for when I get back down. He told me to go home sooner than I wanted, because he reminded me obedience is better than sacrifice. I wasn't trying to, just, I could do this for 3 days and, I'm a man. But I remember he giving me instructions on what to do. And so I went down the mountain, came back home. I walked from Otay Lakes to Sunbow. I remember coming down the mountain, and the first thing I did was go to McDonald's for a quarter pounder. And that was it. Yeah.
What was your biggest takeaway from that?
I think the obedience is better than sacrifice. I don't know if it was Keith. Is Keith Green the one who said, or Keith Green? Who said that?
The song.
Yeah,
he
the
wrote a
song. I think that was one of the things that still sticks with me. Like, you could sacrifice all this stuff for God, but if you don't obey him, that's worth more than any sacrifice you can give. What's the point of you giving up stuff that God doesn't really want? Mm-hmm. It's more, he wants you to listen to him, I think that's what stuck with me the most. Despite the experiences that I had there, that's what the life lesson I still remember.
Mm. And on that venture with God out there, did you? I'm sure there was some kind of expectation going in. Mm-hmm. When it was all said and done, did you feel like you were able to get what you were looking for out there? Because to be honest with you, when I heard you were going, there was a healthy, jealous part of me seeing that you were willing to put everything aside and be in an unknown place, being vulnerable to animals, whatever the case is, just because you wanted to see God. And I remember just the thought that you were doing that. It touched me. I was like, I don't know if I could do that. But was the expectation you had going in, would you say that that was either met or what you were trying to get out of that experience? Were you able to get what you were looking for?
Yeah, I think it came in like a package I wasn't expecting. I think that's what it was. I was expecting something, and I think that's when you come to prayer, I feel like you have to come with expectation. I feel like, and for me, like building up to that, I was wanting this supernatural encounter because I feel like I knew God on like this emotional and like this knowing sense. It was I don't know how to explain it, but I just almost wanted him to, come down and meet me. And I think it was subtle. It wasn't this crazy
Audible voice and all that kind of stuff.
And so I think from when he said that night, he's in the quiet. And I think being in the quiet, it was just me and God. And I think that's where he deposited something in me, but I don't know if I think I've seen the fruit from it, but I'm not sure where I'm going now. I'm losing track.
Well, I think that what you experienced on that mountain, sometimes you're not going to see the fruit of it right away, but later on in life, you'll start seeing that fruit manifest or come forward. But I think that more than anything, it could be for a later on in time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree.
And since that event, has there been other times that you've either put things aside to try to like seek his face above just the normal, day that we tend to seek God in prayer or reading? Or was there anything after that took place, or you set aside a time to kind of seek him again?
I think that was the last time I actually like went physically out of my way to do it.
Okay.
But I think a lot of it in that period, a season of my life, I was staying up late and waking up early, one of the two of those. And I remember a lot of weeping for some reason. Not for some reason. I wanted to know God's heart. And I remember weeping a lot. And I don't know, I feel like I was weeping over people that I knew that didn't know him. And I think that's what kept me going, was feeling that like I feel like I'm getting somewhere with God, and I feel like he's letting me in his little tight-knit group almost, in a way. Not his his inner circle, but just I feel like he was like my dad. And I just remember a lot of weeping in prayer, and I would fast. I think I would fast a lot more than I would, or I started to do it because I was like, okay, so I'm reading, I'm praying. What else can I do? I'll fast. And I remember fasting almost like helped me get closer, and these little things were just helping me get closer and closer. I felt like, not that I was getting like in better terms with God, but you just there
was a closeness.
There's a hunger to want to know him, to want to do anything I can to be with him. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
If you had to share with everybody listening right now, who's Jesus to you?
I think for me, so there was that season where I felt like I was getting close with God, but I know I didn't really talk about like the season where I kind of withdrew myself from God. And I think that season, like 2019, I lost somebody. I lost somebody. I wasn't like best friends with them, but I spent a lot of time with them. And when I was tight with God at the time, and I was like, God, I know you could heal him. And I remember all these people were looking at me like, God.
Like wanting answers.
Like wanting answers, and like he could heal him. I'm like, yeah, he can. And so I remember praying. I remember going to the chapel at the
Hospital.
at the hospital, because he had attempted to take his own life. And I remember going with Jess to the chapel praying, and I was mad at myself. I'm like, I'm not close enough to God. He can't hear me. And I don't know why I was thinking that, but I just felt like there's a reason. It's almost like on me. I feel like I took it on me, like I'm doing something that I'm not supposed to be doing. There's like sin that I haven't dealt with apparently, and God won't hear me right now. And after that moment when they pulled the plug and he was gone, from there I just kind of went down like this spiral to where I didn't want anything to do with God. And I didn't realize how fickle I thought my relationship was. But over that, I feel like I was doubting God. I was opening my mind to other stuff that I shouldn't have been. And I feel like since then, my relationship hasn't been as strong as it was before that, when it got rocked by like life. And I didn't realize how I don't know, like I don't know if it was transactional would be the word, where I felt like I was getting close with him, so I was like, okay, keep pushing. And then once I felt that, okay, I didn't feel him, or I maybe I didn't feel him, but I didn't realize his hand and what he was planning. That's when I started stepping back and pulling away. And I think when you ask who is Jesus to me, throughout my period of first encountering God in 2015 to where I'm at now, I feel like there's this like deep knowing in my heart that he's a friend still. He's a lover still. And I know he's there still. And I know I haven't fully jumped into his arms like I want to. Like there's something holding me back, or I'm scared, if that makes sense. And I think that's who Jesus is to me. And he still is. But I know from then, I just, it's been rocky. Like I'm in, I'm out, I'm in, I'm out. But that's who Jesus would be to me.
Do you feel at times that maybe you're not good enough, and maybe that could be holding you back? That feeling of that you feel that you're not good enough? Or maybe you're feeling like maybe I'm not worthy?
I think for a long time, the unworthiness, I remember going like to Emerge with Mac, and you write this stuff you carry on these boards, and you carry them throughout the weekend. And I know unworthiness was for 2 years, I think. Yeah, 2 years it was on my board. And I kept feeling like no one loved me for me, but they loved the God in me. And so I was just condescending on myself. And I was like, oh, you're no good without God. He's not going to want you back after you're opening your mind to all this. I wasn't even like practicing witchcraft or anything. I was just, maybe there's another God, or not, maybe there's another God, but, is there a God? Is he real? Or was it just me thinking and being emotional? And I feel sick to ever remember that that's how I was thinking. But I know unworthiness was something I was dealing with, but I feel like I've gotten over that to where I shouldn't be thinking that way And I think it's just the enemy trying to keep me down.
Right.
But I writing in that same journal I kept writing, God, whatever happens to me, don't unhaunt me. Meaning, don't let me be okay in life without you. And he's kept that promise, because I know you guys being in my family, you guys get to see when I'm struggling, when I'm doing good. You guys see that firsthand. I know Ruth, she gives me a look, like how you say, I give you a look, Mom. Ruth would give me a look. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I know I'm not where I want to be right now. But I think that's something he's always kept his promise. When not his promise, but when I asked him to do that, he still does that. I don't think I'm satisfied in life without it.
And do you think another little part of like processing that this part of the journey where like after that person passed is that there was maybe a little frustration not knowing either the will of God for that exact situation or God, you didn't perform like I thought you would.
I think both of those, because I think I know God works everything for good, and I don't know if I've seen it yet, but I trust in it. I trust in the process, and I think a lot of it was I was expecting him to perform a certain way, and he didn't, and that's what knocked me off. And so for years, I felt like I was just beating myself up, and I would tell Jess, because I would just break down, and I was like, I just want to hurt myself. Like, not like, I just felt like mentally, I was like hitting myself in the face. And I remember, driving home late, and I'd just be like, from leaving her, after seeing her, I just start screaming in my van, come home, just, pretend everything's fine. But I just felt like I hated myself I don't know where it came from, but I don't know. I wish it didn't happen, but I feel like there's a reason, and I'm happy I'm not in that same place where I was. But I think the expectation of God performing a certain way in your eyes is not always healthy. You got to trust that he knows what he's doing. You're not the one who created everything. He's the one who created it. He knows you better than you know yourself. And I think being okay with that, not being in control, and like just let him work. I think that's what I learned from it.
Because I think sometimes God will, before traumatic moments like that or life-changing events, I think many times, like how that mountain experience, that's kind of why I brought that up, because I know, even the stuff that you don't remember when you were a kid, all these little things, not little things, but things that God's done in your life, whether you remember or not, it's like God's putting pillars in your life of a reference point saying, here, I was here. I met with you here. I did this to you here. I sowed this into you here. That night, I was there when you didn't understand and all this stuff. So he places pillars in our lives to support us when those times come. Those life-changing moments that could disrupt our whole walk, our journey with him, everything, to where it's like, I'm not even sure if you exist, God. But that's why I feel like God sets a stage beforehand, showing you that he was there when you were scared of spiders and you were paranoid. And then he shows up to you and you see him, you describe him. And it was like this vision that you had that Mom was questioning. At first she's like, I want to make sure this is, he's not just saying this, not in a weird way, but that's why she would question you. And you described everything to like, man, I couldn't see his face because it was so bright. It was like so glorious. And he had men around him, big, tall men. So God marks people's lives just like he did yours, so that when those life-changing times come, you could go back and God was there. God was there. He met me here. He did this to me. But so often, sometimes we just turn a blind eye to that because we're living in this situation that's so real and so life-changing that it's just kind of disrupt your whole life. And like you don't have any stability for the moment. But sometimes we fail to look back at his faithfulness and the times that he did show up, that he didn't to maybe one of your other siblings. But I think that it's so important for us to remember when God was there, because when we forget, then we just kind of disqualify all of that and just mark that off as if it never existed. But it's so the opposite. He's trying to show you before, and not just you, but people going through life that, you know, they healed them from this. They showed up when, you know, their mom and dad were fighting and they went into the room and all of a sudden they got comforted by the presence of God, you know, and felt God show up in the room, and there was a healing moment in the midst of something so traumatic. And I think that sometimes we belittle those moments, and it's easy to push them aside because what we're going through right this minute is so real. Mm-hmm. And I think God just wants us to remind us that he's there for us. He's shown up many times that we know and unknown. You know what I mean? I think that's probably for every single person. If every single person actually wanted to look back that, you know, God showed up and, you know, just did different things that, you know, and made himself known. I think we got to really try to reflect on that because it didn't happen, you know, coincidental. It's more like he's sowing seeds into us so that we could see the fruit of it later. But we can't, you know, it's even though those crazy times happen in life, and they probably will still continue to happen. But he's saying, hey, I'm faithful. I'm here. I want to be with you. Let's do this together. I love you, and I want you to love me, and let's just go through this thing called life, you know?
I think a lot of why I've not given up was because I think you three here more than anyone. I feel like that constant reminder that God has his hand on our lives and my life, and you remind me that his hand has been on me. I think that's why I haven't given up. And I feel like I didn't have you guys. My mom, Ruth, you, Dad. If I didn't have you guys, I don't know where I'd be. I know I've always told you guys thank you. You know, I've sent you guys these texts like, hey, thanks for not giving up on me. But I just want to say thank you guys for not giving up on me.
And to be honest with you, we would probably all say the same thing to you. Because you know our walk as well hasn't been the greatest at times. You didn't give up on us. You still want to be a part of our lives. You said something earlier, and you said that you sometimes, I don't know if it's wondering or like, you know, I don't know if people really love me or if it's just the God in me. God has so heavily marked your life that it's all the same thing. It's not you. It's not God outside of you or away from you. Or at the time you might be saturated in him. And they're two different things. When I see you, there's no difference. Because it's a package deal when I see you. Whether you are in a season of being close to God, or you're in a season that maybe you're not close to God, just who you are and what you represent, what your life brings to the table in either one of those seasons. When you come around, there's conviction that hits me in particular because of how you are the way you are. Because it's a package deal. You can't run away. There's no great divide there. So you were meant to have him in you all along. Just because it don't feel this way or does feel this way, it's still the same thing. That's from the outside looking in. The frustration is the inside processing and determining, is this qualified? Maybe does this not qualify? Am I outside his graces because I'm doing this? Or when I see you, I can't see the difference. It's hard. It's so blurred because to me, it's all one. So I just want you to know that I could probably speak for them as well, but that's what I see when I see you. Because just the love walk you have, I could probably count on one hand how many people I see can walk this love walk like you. And it's not just because you know God. It's because maybe you've internalized it so well that you walk it out without thinking. Maybe that's what it is. That you've internalized it and been saturated with a deepness within God that you walk it out without even having to say a word. Because since you've been a kid, I don't know how many people, I could be here for probably a couple hours mentioning how many people have said this about you that you don't even know. Family members, friends, you're one of the ones when it comes to the kids, how's Gio? And it's because God in you, period. He's never going to not be with you. You can't separate it. As much as your mind might tell you so, know within your heart of hearts, it can't be separated. Because you're walking things out according to his will without even thinking many times. And it's because of those moments that you've had with God that have made such a change in your life that it's the fruit is just, it's bearing fruit whether you like it or not. Good fruit. So I love you, all that you represent, and I don't know where my life would be without you. So I return what you just said.
You just had to one-up me.
So thank you for tuning into today's podcast. I didn't talk much because I was crying half of it or more than half of it. But we just pray that this touched you, that this encouraged you. If you feel like you're in a season where you feel separate, know that God is with you always, always watching you. And he's always ready to just bombard you with his presence if you allow him to. So we love you. Thanks for tuning in and have a great night.